Hey everybody, it's Mike, your host of Insider Secrets, brought to you by My Core Intentions. Today my guest is Adam Nishikawa, and we're going to talk about 1031 exchanges. Hey Adam, would you let our listeners know a little bit about what they can expect this afternoon?
Absolutely. This afternoon, we're going to be discussing the delayed exchange, reverse exchange, all of the general requirements for a successful 1031 exchange, as well as how to avoid some of the pitfalls that we see investors facing today. It's really important that we can address all of the different aspects of the 1031 exchange so our investors, brokers, and escrow officers feel 100% prepared to enter that transaction.
Awesome. And you'll have to tune in to listen to the rest of that because it's going to be some great information today. Look forward to seeing everybody soon. Adam, we'll talk to you in a few minutes.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Welcome to this week's edition of Insider Secrets, the show that turns multifamily investing into reality. Each show we interview guests who are seasoned professionals, actively closing and managing real estate deals. Your host, Mike Morawski, has more than 30 years of multifamily real estate investing and property management experience. Mike is the founder of My Core Intentions and has been involved in over $285 million of transactions. Focuses on helping you create short-term cash flow and long-term wealth. Here's your host, Mike.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. It's Mike, your host of Insider Secrets. Welcome back. And Insider Secrets is brought to you by My Core Intentions. So I always ask, have you been thinking about your intentions, what your plans are, what your goals are? But more importantly, what is your why? Are you crystal clear on your why and what you want to accomplish? At MCI, we invest in our clients' future through an education and training platform, teaching you how to invest in multifamily, how to create short-term cash flow and long-term wealth while empowering you in sound real estate principles through these while living a balanced lifestyle. So my goal is to help you develop a strong foundation of practical principles to help drive your business to the next level, whether you're a new investor or a novice investor. You know what? And shamelessly, I'm going to tell you, I cover a lot of those techniques in my new book, Exit Plan, Your Complete Guide to Multifamily Investing and Why You Need an Exit Plan Before You Buy. You can pick that up on my website or at Amazon. But enough of that right now. I'm excited about my guest today, Adam Nishikawa with Exchange Resources. And Adam, you want to say hi to everybody real quick?
Yes, hello, and thank you for having me on the show.
You bet. I'm glad you're here. And Adam's going to talk to us today about 1031 and 1031 exchanges. Adam began his career as a commercial real estate agent, serving both individuals and institutional investors through the leasing and sales process. After witnessing the tremendous potential of a properly deployed 1031 exchange, the doors opened for him to become an intermediary or a 1031 advisor. Over the past 4 years, he's assisted thousands of successful exchanges all across the country, providing and offering free classes for brokers, escrow officers, and investors seeking to create generational wealth through an effective 1031 exchange strategy. Adam, I am really glad you're here today, and I'm looking forward to being able to deliver a whole bunch of good information to our listeners today. What I'd like to do is, in one word, and I ask everybody on my show this, in one word, describe who you are and your business strategy.
One word, I guess I'd have to choose helpful. And that word is really just the goal of my business, is to be helpful for investors, helpful for CPAs, brokers, anybody in the real estate space to really understand the 1031 exchange and make it easy for them to accomplish.
Good. That's awesome. Good. Yeah, always giving back. It seems like there might even be a little shift happening in the world, but everybody I've been talking to lately is more about what can I do for you than what am I going to get out of it? And it's a nice relief, especially after hearing some of the rhetoric lately that we hear on social media and other places. But hey, Adam, why don't we start with your background? Tell us a little bit about how you got in real estate, what your passions are, and how you wound up making that transition into 1031s.
Yeah, I think just like a lot of people's stories, it was pretty accidental. I graduated from Point Loma Nazarene University, and wanted to go into real estate. I was working for a property manager at the time. And I got my real estate license pretty quickly after college and started selling real estate, and as well as helping people through the leasing process from tenant representation and brokerage. And it was so interesting, all of the investors that I met with. My first impression was that they all drove Ferraris and they all had Range Rovers, and they were all living very lavish lifestyles. But I met a lot of investors who were mom and pop investors, and they started with nothing. A lot of them even immigrants to the country. And I got to see how they used the 1031 exchange, which at the time I really didn't understand, to grow their portfolios to what it was nearing towards the sunsetting years of their life. But it was just very interesting interacting with that from the brokerage side and the leasing side. And I ended up actually leasing some office space to the company I work for now up in Orange County. And that was actually the accident. I wasn't even really looking for a shift in career, but they offered me a job. And at the time, my wife was working in San Diego, and this job that I was currently working was up in Orange County. And so it seemed like it was a door opening, and I took the jump.
Nice. Good for you. So you live in San Diego though, right? But your office is up in Orange County, Irvine, or?
No, we have a San Diego office.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Office as well, and an Los Angeles office. And because we do 1031s all across the country, we have offices in several other locations.
Okay, nice. Good. And so why don't we start with this? I'm sure that there's a number of listeners on the call today who don't know what a 1031 actually is or understand it. So before we get granular, get down into processes and things, let's explain what the 1031 exchange actually is and how it benefits the investor.
Absolutely. The 1031 exchange, 1031 is a reference to the section of the Internal Revenue Code. So a lot of people, they have this misinterpretation that the 1031 is a loophole, but it actually is part of the tax code. And in simple terms, it is this. It's a transaction which permits an investor to defer the payment of capital gains tax by exchanging like-kind investment property for like-kind investment property. So it's a transaction, simply put, and is really not as complex as some people believe it is.
So when you talk about like-kind investment, does that mean that I can go from a single family house into a commercial multifamily apartment?
Yeah, the like-kind is a pretty broad term, and it's really the qualified use of the property for investment or business purposes. And so it's a really broad scope. So like-kind really can be a condo into raw land, can be a condo into multifamily, it could be multifamily into retail and commercial or office space. There's really no limit as to what kind of real property it is.
But could I sell my boat if I made a profit on it? And would that be a like-kind exchange if I went into real estate?
Not too long ago, property was allowed with the 1031 exchange, but recently that has been eliminated from that section of the tax code. So unfortunately, boats, artwork, cars, those personal property assets are now excluded from the 1031 exchange.
That's good to know. I know you're not an attorney, but can you explain what the tax rates are on the capital gains, short-term, long-term, and how an investor is affected by that if they pull capital out of a property? Or I just wrote a book called Exit Plan, and I talk about exiting and knowing when to exit and when the right time is and how to exit. One of the things I talk about is 1031 or just completely getting out of the deal or other alternatives. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So the 1031 exchange helps you defer all of your capital gains tax, and the capital gain rate was up to 20% of whatever appreciation you've had on your asset since you've purchased it. What's also included in there is going to be the depreciation recapture. At least here in California, we have a clawback provision. So when you sell an asset here in California, the Franchise Tax Board wants depreciation recapture on that property. And that is going to equal 25% of your benefit that you've taken over the lifetime of the asset. So if you have a residential property which depreciates for 27 and a half years, You've been taking that every year as part of your tax return. And then at the end, if you decide to sell that property, you would owe 25% of that benefit back to the government. So that's a big chunk of that capital gain tax, as well as the Medicare surcharge tax, which is 3.8%. Some people call that the Obamacare tax. And all of these taxes, our investors are looking at anywhere between 15 and 30 something percent of their sale price as taxable. So that can be a pretty significant portion of our investors' hard-earned investment.
Wow, that's interesting on that clawback provision. So would that even affect somebody, Adam, who is in their personal residence?
So for your personal residence, you receive something called the 121 exclusion, and that is $250,000 if you're single and $500,000 if you're married of your capital gain tax-free. And so the 1031 exchange is really only for investors, and it's for properties, not private.
Okay. Is there one type of exchange, or are there multiple types of exchanges? As an investor, do I need to know, what do I need to really be aware of or know?
Yeah, I think primarily the most common type of a 1031 exchange is called the delayed exchange. And that's where your investor is going to sell first and buy later. We have several other types of exchanges, such as a reverse exchange, which would allow an investor to purchase their replacement property first. We also have something called the construction exchange, which allows an investor to use their hard-earned capital gains to make improvements on their replacement property. And we also do some hybrid exchanges for different complex tax scenarios. But the most common is definitely the delayed exchange, and that's what 90% of our investors are executing.
I really have a couple questions around the delayed exchange. When is the best time? What's the right or best time for an investor to use that delayed exchange?
The delayed exchange, when an investor chooses to use an exchange, there's several really good reasons that I have seen my investors utilize it. And the first one is definitely just facing a large equity position. So I always give the example of two apartment buildings side by side, identical apartment buildings, but one apartment building is paid off, all cash, and the second apartment building has a loan on it. Let's just say 50%, just for round numbers. And I always ask the investor, which apartment building can charge more rent? And they always think about it, and they realize they're identical buildings and they're charging identical rent. But if you have all this equity parked inside of your property, it's not working hard for you. That cash on cash return, when you do the math, you're going to realize it's really not working for you. As a matter of fact, your cash on cash return could be 1% or less. And so for a lot of investors, they're really looking to move that equity, and they're looking to grow their portfolio, utilizing that equity, because they want those tenants paying down those mortgages for them. And so I think equity position is the number one reason I think people look to utilize this delayed exchange. The second most important reason would be depreciation. If you have an investor who, say, has owned a property for 26 years, they're coming up on the end of their depreciation schedule of 27 and a half years for a residential property. That means they're going to run out of tax benefits at that point. And so at that, I would say, crux in their position, they may be looking to buy up in value and exchange to get more tax benefits. And especially as their portfolio, their other stocks, their other investments are going up in value, this is the time for them to really keep those tax benefits moving forward. And so depreciation can be a big reason. And for those listening, commercial real estate has a depreciation schedule of 39 years. And so slightly longer, but still they may be in that position to increase their depreciation benefits. I guess third, I would put just movement. I think with technology today, you don't need to live next to your investment property. But I have investors who they self-manage, or they enjoy being next to their investment property. And so maybe they're leaving California, moving to Texas, like a lot of people seem to. They may be looking to move that investment property closer to them. So that could be a reason that they want to utilize a 1031 exchange. Out of those top three, I guess the fourth one I would add might be diversification. I think a lot of investors, especially the mom and pop investors I work with, I love working with them because it's like that micro portfolio and they're looking for ways to mitigate their risk as they get older. And they want to diversify, especially with COVID-19. If they only had one tenant in their one condo investment property that they own, and that tenant could unfortunately was unable to pay their rent, they're losing 100% of their income because they only have one condo. But they could utilize the 1031 exchange to then sell that condo, take that equity into a couple different properties, maybe a few if possible. And that way, when they lose a tenant, they're not losing 100% of their cash flow, especially if they really depend on that income in their retirement years. I think that's one of the key benefits of the 1031 exchange. Hope your question there, Mike.
Yeah, no, that's good answers, good data. I find it interesting. I had to laugh when you said people are leaving California, going to Texas, because I know a number of people that have done that. And I'm trying to get to Orange County. I live in Chicago, but I'm glad they're leaving though, because it's making room for guys like me coming out there. Hey, why don't you talk about the process and timelines a little bit? So if we're going to do a deferred exchange, I'm going to sell a property that I have a single family house that I have rented right now. I want to sell out of that and I want to move into a 6 flat or a 10 flat. Tell me about the process and the timelines.
Perfect. So the 1031 exchange, the IRS doesn't just let you take your sweet time on doing this transaction. They do give you a few deadlines. And I want to explain a little bit about the delayed exchange process. So the first and most important thing that I believe is preparation. I get these calls the day before escrow is closing on an investment property telling me, hey, I just heard about something called the 1031 exchange, but they don't know their tax liability. They don't know where they're looking to purchase a property, and they're pretty wholly unprepared. And so I always think the beginning of the exchange process is the preparation. And I think that every investor should consult their CPA, find out what is their tax liability on the property, how much, what consequences are they facing for a failed exchange, and what consequences are they facing for a successful exchange. And so I really think that preparation, getting a team around you, a broker, a CPA, a lender, understanding where your position is key to a successful 1031 exchange. But as far as the first time frame is, it begins at the close of escrow on your investment property. So you would list your property just like you would any other primary residence, just going to go on the market. We have a little sentence you put in there just saying you're doing a 1031 exchange and notifying the buyer. And you're going to get into escrow on that property. And once escrow closes, the IRS is going to give you 45 days to identify your replacement property. So 45 days can go by fairly quickly. It's just over a month. And you will be able to identify through several different methods. So that first 45 days is crucial. I would hope that an investor would have picked out the market, picked out the state that they plan on purchasing in, and as well as what kind of product they're looking for and what kind of return they expect. And once they've picked a few properties, they're going to narrow it down, and they're going to have two options. The first is going to be the 3 property rule, and that's going to be identifying up to 3 properties regardless of fair market value. So if they sell for $500,000, they can list $20 million of real estate as long as it's only 3 properties. So they won't have any limit as to what those assets are like. The other option is the 200% rule. So for my investors coming out of San Diego, selling a condo for $1 million and going into, say, Georgia, they need to spend $1 million. And we'll get into kind of how you calculate the net replacement value, but they're going to need to identify potentially more than 3 properties in Georgia. And so they'll the 200% rule. Now they can identify as many properties as they'd like, up to 200% of their sale price. So up to $2 million, they can list 4 or more properties. And as long as the aggregate fair market value does not exceed 200% of their sale price. So those are the 2 identification options that are most commonly used and will be utilized during that 45 days to identify their replacement properties. Now, after they've identified their properties, they will need to close escrow by the 180th day. So they'll have just shy of 6 months to finish the transaction. The more prepared you are, the more successful you are. And I'm proud to say over 95% of our investors are successful at executing their 1031 exchange. And so that's why I like to see a lot of preparation in advance. I have transactions not coming for 2 years down the road because there were things that they had to clear up before they could do their sale. So those, I would say definitely that 45 days is crucial, and then you must execute by the 180th day.
So does the clock start ticking at the time the buyer gives you a contract or at the close?
The clock starts ticking at the
Close of escrow. Okay.
You need extra time, you're going to need to extend your escrow.
Okay.
Some sellers, it depends on where the market's at. If it's a seller's market or a buyer's market, how much they're willing to work with your timeframes. But it's definitely worth it to have a clause or two in there of maybe a 15 or 30-day extension if you really are having a hard time nailing down the market you want to move into.
Okay. So you mentioned something early on when you were talking about that you want to put a clause in the listing agreement that the buyer, or let the buyer know that you're going to do a 1031 exchange. Why is that important?
You know, that clause helps, although it may not be required from the standpoint of legally, it will help you create that precursor of your intent to do a 1031 exchange. So if the IRS audits you and says, hey, you did a 1031 exchange, we want proof that it was your intent to do this in advance to make sure nobody was backdating any docs or doing anything illegal. They can see that it was in the sale contract, so they'll know it was your intent to do a 1031 exchange with that property.
Okay. It's interesting. What kind of lessons have you learned as a result? One of the things that you talk about early on is your passion from coming out of that leasing space into seeing a successful 1031 being done. What kind of things have you learned that got you really excited about this space, and why do you think that it's so beneficial?
Yeah, I'm a fan of stocks and bonds and other investments, but real estate, I've seen countless number of people come to America and are able to really create what I consider generational wealth for the kids, and to help set their families up to a point where, you know, the 9-to-5 job isn't essential to their survival. And it was just pretty refreshing to see really just a group of entrepreneurs. You know, I always think of real estate investors as entrepreneurs because it is, you know, their business, and they have an independent impact on how they run their business. And so I think what I've learned over the years is what I really love about real estate and the 1031 exchange is that anybody can do it. And it's just been great to see families really the freedom it provides them for personal growth outside of just their careers.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you. This show is called Insider Secrets, right? So from your vantage point, looking in at real estate investors and the markets, what do you see as an insider secret, or that an investor should pay attention to today?
There's a lot of insider secrets that investors need to pay attention to, but if I had to share one detail of all of my most successful investors, people who I think have done the best job of growing their portfolios, I would say it's putting a team of people that you trust, advisors around you early on in the investment process, not waiting. Like, I have some investors, they really think that the brokers are trying to take them for all they're worth, and they think the CPA is going to charge them up the wazoo, and they think that all these advisors are just people trying to get paid off of them. But the most successful investors that I have are investors who surround themselves with a team of trusted professionals to help them through the investment process, because none of us can know everything about all of these aspects of real estate investing. And we need a team of people around us to help us through these processes. And I'm talking about from the broker, from the CPA, making sure you're getting all of your tax advantages, the broker bringing you opportunities. Can't tell you how many investors have gotten off market, underappreciated properties for what I consider really good deals that have helped their portfolios grow significantly quicker than if they were just out there searching themselves, knocking on doors. Really just having those advisors around you makes this so much more successful. And I think that the biggest insider secret I can share is just making sure you have that team of advisors around you, no matter what, if your only investment property is $50,000 or it's $10 million.
Yeah. Well spoken, by the way. And I'm in the coaching business, and I think a lot of times people miss those things. And it's really important that people with more experience mentor and coach the people around us so that they don't miss them as much as they do, right? How do you, from a personal standpoint, how do you make high stakes business decisions?
I think the easiest way to make a high stakes business decision is to get all the facts and just make sure you're making an informed decision. One of the things I do for my investors is I'll send them a property analysis calculator. It's just an Excel spreadsheet that can help them run through the numbers and really make sure they understand the full, everything about a property, from the expenses to the income potential. I see so many investors buying properties because of potential income instead of the reality of the income. And I think it's just gathering all of the details. And so I always tell my investors, just get all the facts. The potential is great, but we need to see what is the reality of this property.
Yeah. So with that said, what mistakes do you see investors making in the marketplace today?
I think I touched on a little bit. Those pre-priced properties, they're promised some return, but in reality, maybe they can't get that return, or it's going to be a lot more work to get to where they want to be. The biggest mistake I've seen, at least in the San Diego market, has been some Airbnb properties. Some communities are not friendly with those types of investments. And especially if you have an HOA, if you buy a property thinking you're going to get XYZ income off of it, it could make your spreadsheet look really good. But in the reality is, some of these properties, the HOA decides they don't want to allow short-term rental properties, or they're going to fight you every day about it. I think those investments have been the most hurtful for investors who were expecting a certain return, potentially overpaid for a property, and weren't able to get that return on the back end. I think that's the biggest mistake. I don't see a ton of mistakes on buying replacement property. I see a lot of successful investors buying property that maybe I didn't originally agree with, and it's not really my job to give them that input, but it turned out really well for them. So
do you give, as sitting from the seat that you're sitting in, do you give investors that advice about the type of property, or if you think it's a good value? Or
yeah, I can share my 2 cents, but I really don't want to step on any broker's feet as far as they are the professional that's helping walk them through this transaction and through these purchases and sales. And I really think they have the best grasp on that.
Yeah.
But if I see an investor about to make a potential mistake, I may say something.
And we would hope that they have the best grasp on it, right? So
exactly.
sometimes, yeah, I've been in the business a long time, and listen, I've made my mistakes, and I think people make mistakes. It's a matter of how we come back from those mistakes. And one of the things I say in my bio is I have a very resilient perspective and attitude. It's about bouncing back and what changes we do differently. Hey, how do you think somebody can build a strong brand today? How do you build a strong brand around what you're doing?
I think for me personally, it's having strong ethics and, well, like I said, with that helpful attitude of, regardless if I'm going to end up working with this client or I'm going to end up getting paid off this transaction, it's just having an attitude of helping everybody, because you never know what people are going through. And they may call you. I've had several investors call me for advice. We end up just talking about life and other things. And down the line, maybe they forget about me, or they don't end up working with me and they pick a different qualified intermediary. I just enjoy serving other people. And I think that when you create a brand, be really, really genuine, and people can spot a fake a mile away. It's just being always able to help people, seeking out, helping people, and making them feel comfortable. And I think that's the brand I hope I portray and I want to create for myself.
Yeah, a couple things that you have said here over the last few minutes that I think are really important. You alluded to ethics. You mentioned ethics. And I think that at the core, it really matters who you are when nobody's around or nobody's looking versus when somebody is looking at you. And I think that shines through with people. The other thing that you talked about was your network, the people around you, your team that you build. And one of the things I teach my coaching clients, and it's really one of the basic early on lessons that I teach with people, is build a strong team and have people around you that buy into your goals and your dreams and that are going to help you accomplish them. And if you build that, will be long lasting for you. And I believe really more and more today that if you build it ethically, that there's a lot to be said for that in life, in business, and in relationships. My new goal this year is to talk to 2 new people a day and just see how I can foster some really good, solid relationships where maybe I can do something for you or help your business grow. I like being able to do that today. What, off the cuff, any new advice that you'd give a brand new investor coming into the marketplace today?
Man, it's hard to, so much potential advice, but
Yeah.
I think it's just be prepared and take advice, even if it's somebody that you don't want to take advice from. Everyone has something good to say. They have some piece of advice that you may disagree with a lot of other things about them, but they're going to search for that one good thing and just listen to as many people as you can.
Nice. Very good job. So on a little lighter note, I love San Diego. What is, and actually I'm an advocate for Orange County, Southern California, anywhere really, but what's your favorite tourist attraction?
Yeah, San Diego has a lot of great things being on the water. We have Coronado Island and all these beautiful beaches, but I think my favorite tourist attraction probably going to be the Midway ship, which is parked over there off of downtown. It's a really cool tour of a old ship that has a lot of history. And another really cool thing about it is if you go during an off season in the summer, they host movies up on the tarmac, up on the top. And there's a lot of really cool things, as well as having a lot of former fighter pilots and stuff that are up there speaking to you about the history of the ship. And it's a great center place to begin exploring San Diego, being that it is anchored off of downtown and it's close to so many restaurants and shops. It's a great place to just start your San Diego adventure, I guess you'd say. Yeah, so I guess that'd be my favorite tourist attraction.
Nice. Speaking of restaurants, what's your favorite restaurant?
San Diego, I think, has grown incredibly over the last few years as far as new restaurants, less chains, a lot of more mom and pop restaurants popping up, authentic cuisines. But I think when you come to San Diego, you really want that view, and it's changed for me because when I think about like COVID's impact on the restaurant business, say I would recommend Costera, which is on Harbor Island in San Diego. And the food is good, but the view is great. And it has a ton of outdoor seating. And I think that's, being in the middle of COVID, important.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. Best book you've ever read?
Best book I've ever read. Oh gosh. For me, shamelessly, I'm going to tell you it's the Bible.
Okay.
But I have been looking for some additional books to add to my collection. So if you have any recommendations, I'd like to turn that question on you and say, what's the number one book you recommend?
Well, the book I just wrote.
No.
Exit Plan. You'll have to get your copy.
Yes, please.
Actually, for me, the Bible is at the top of my list. And the best investor book I've ever read is called The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, written by Gary Keller. I was a Keller Williams agent for a number of years. And it's one of those books. I always said it was the investor's Bible, that they could go back to it over and over again and understand philosophy and technique and strategy. I always felt that was a really good book. So when, a matter of fact, when I went into syndication business, I taught from that book a lot. So that's a whole nother podcast. But hey, Adam, I thank you very much for being here today. You've been a wealth of knowledge and information. I know that my listeners will really appreciate your information. How do they get a hold of you, knowing that you can do a 1031 anywhere in the country? How do they get a hold of you to pick your brain and possibly be involved?
Yeah, they can go onto our website, which is exchangeresources.net or .com, or they can reach me through my cell phone, which is going to be 619-550-6776. And my email, which I'm sure will be provided on here, but you can get that through the website. My last name is Nishikawa, so it can be long, spelling that out for everybody. But yeah, I'm available anytime. Anybody wants to just chat, discuss. Like I said, I have transactions 2 years down the line, and preparation was key. So I'm happy to discuss way in the future plans for any investors just that want to make sure that they're prepared and pushing their property in that direction.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. And all your information will be on our website and on the show notes as we get ready to air this episode. Hey, again, I want to thank you for being here. You've been a wealth of knowledge. I know my listeners have appreciated that too. Hey, everybody, thanks for being here Tuesday afternoon, Insider Secrets. Make sure that you go and subscribe on YouTube and on Apple, Spotify, wherever you're at. Love us, like us, and tell your friends about us, would you? And help us grow. Thank you. And we will look forward to seeing you next week. Adam, have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for joining us for another great episode of Insider Secrets. As always, Insider Secrets is brought to you by My Core Intentions. Join us on social media and visit mycoreintentions.com, where you can get expert coaching on all things multifamily investing and property management. We're looking forward to having you back again next week for more Insider Secrets.